Alexander Prokopchuk is in line to be the new head of Interpol. Image, Getty. The planned appointment of a Russian general to head up international police organization Interpol would be like putting a fox in charge of a henhouse, and is part of Vladimir Putin's plan to weaken democratic institutions, a group of U.S. politicians has said, but the Kremlin has hit back, suggesting the opposition amounted to election meddling, in an apparent dig at the probe into claims Russia did precisely that during the 2016 U.S. presidential vote. Alexander Prokopchuk, a former head of Russia's Interior Ministry, is thought to be in pole position to take over from his president from Meng Hongwei, who is being investigated in China over corruption allegations. A decision will be taken after a vote tomorrow at Interpol's annual General Assembly in Dubai. But critics fear his appointment would enable Russia to abuse the agency's international arrest warrant procedure. In a joint statement, U.S. Senators Marco Rubio, Roger Wicker, Jeanne Shaheen and Chris Coons said, Interpol electing Major General Alexander Prokopchuk as its new president is akin to putting a fox in charge of a henhouse. Russia routinely abuses Interpol for the purpose of settling scores and harassing political opponents, dissidents and journalists. Alexander Prokopchuk has been personally involved in this intimidation strategy which ultimately seeks to weaken democratic institutions and embolden Putin's authoritarian regime. Bill Browder addresses a press conference today. Image, YouTube. If elected as president by the members of Interpol's General Assembly on Wednesday, we have no doubt that Mr. Prokopchuk will further institutionalize the abuse of Interpol red notices and block ongoing efforts at meaningful reform. In addition, they claimed the access Mr. Prokopchuk would have to sensitive law enforcement data would make it easier for Mr. Putin to harass critics living outside Russia. For these reasons, we urge all 192 members to stand for the integrity of Interpol as a legitimate international law enforcement mechanism and vote against Mr. Prokopchuk. We continue to call on our administration to use its voice, vote and influence to ensure that Interpol can no longer be co-opted by Putin and other dictators for their own nefarious purposes. Marco Rubio is among 4 senators calling for Interpol to block the appointment. Image, Getty. If you put a Russian in charge of this organization, that effectively means the mafia has taken over international law enforcement. Bill Browder, who has criticized Mr. Putin in the past, was arrested in Spain earlier this year in charges which have since been disproved, with the Spanish authorities citing an Interpol arrest warrant at Russia's request. U.S.-born British businessman Mr. Browder, who is holding a press conference this afternoon to discuss the matter today, told journalist Dan Ashby earlier, Russia has become one of the most aggressive abusers of Interpol in order to go after its enemies. If you put a Russian in charge of this organization, that effectively means the mafia has taken over international law enforcement. Mr. Browder has been the creation of the Magnitsky Act, sanctions which were imposed by the U.S. in 2012 on top Russian officials accused of corruption. The measures were named in honor of his Russian lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, who was imprisoned in the country after uncovering a £174 million fraud thought to have involved Russian officials against Mr. Browder's company, Hermitage Capital Management. He eventually died in jail amid claims of torture. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters on a conference call, this is probably a certain kind of interference in the electoral process of an international organization. Express.co.uk has approached the Foreign Office to ask for their response to the prospect of Mr. Prokopchuk's appointment.